Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing tonight?
Good, good. It's encouraging. I mean, I've been following this COVID thing like everybody else. I'm a little bit COVIDed out like everybody else in terms of like reading about it, I'm sure. But, the numbers are encouraging in Alberta, especially in Edmonton, Bruce. I mean, they're just, there's a 1 or 2, 3 new cases a day, and it's been that way for a few weeks now. So it's kind of encouraging that the isolation measures have worked, because they certainly are hard on people. But it's paying off.
We had a death here in the Sturgeon Hospital in St. Albert the other day. That's a little unsettling to have it close to home like that, but
yeah,
there are deaths everywhere.
Alrighty. We are going to talk about non-COVID topics, and we're mainly going to talk about. I was fortunate enough to ask. I've been working on this PK stuff, Bruce, trying to figure out the Oilers' penalty kill. And I mean, there's a few things that hit you over the head, right? Like the save percentage being so much better this year than last year, and then the other thing that hits you over the head is they allowed more shots on the PK, but they gave up fewer grade A chances and fewer goals on the PK. So that's an obvious stat hitting you over the head that something's going on, but what is it? I've been writing a series of posts on it and becoming increasingly frustrated because I don't have the answers, but somebody did, and I thought, okay, maybe I could get an interview with an Oilers coach. They're at home like the rest of us. Maybe they have time to talk to me, and fortunately, Jim Playfair did. He's the person. He calls himself the head communicator on the PK. He doesn't, he says it's a team effort. All the coaches are involved. Okay. But he's the guy who is he's the head communicator. So he took on the task, and he took a half hour to talk to me about exactly what the PK did this year. And he didn't talk so much about last year when they had the worst save percentage in the NHL, about anything that went on last year. But he did talk about.
He wasn't here last year.
He wasn't here, and he did study it. He might have some things to say, but he did talk about what they were trying to do this year and how it worked out. And I think he gave actually an absolutely stellar description of the tactics that they used this year and that paid off this year. Now, maybe they use the same tactics next year and they don't pay off, but he did a very fine job, I thought, of describing what happened on the PK. So we're going to talk about that interview. It's now posted. Okay. But before that, Bruce, let's just quickly talk about a spate of signings on the Oilers, and one that's going to be negotiated hopefully in the next month or so, if it's negotiated at all. That's the Riley Sheahan signing. But before that, they signed a couple more Euro defenders. Markus Niemelainen, who was a third-round draft pick, I believe, in 2016. Yep. And Philip Berglund. Now, he's not coming over next year. Right. Berglund's coming over the year after, and he was, a fourth-round pick?
He was also a third-round draft pick in 2016.
All right.
They actually had 3 of them, and they used them all on defensemen, the third one being a U.S. college guy named Matthew Cairns, who is not really developing all that rapidly, but there's still time. They all 3 bets, they had 4 years kind of to wait to see how the guys developed, and they used almost the full 4 years on each of Markus Niemelainen and Philip Berglund. And it looked like both guys might just be sort of drifting back into unrestricted territory, but Scott Howson gave an interview with Bob Stauffer a little over a month ago, and he's now president of the American Hockey League, Scott Howson. So that was kind of one of his last official communications as on behalf of the Oilers. But at that time, he expressed the organization's interest in and confidence in signing both players. And Scott Howson's a man of his word, apparently, because on April 30th, they signed Niemelainen, and on May 1st, they turned around and signed Philip Berglund. So 2 more big Nordic defensemen to the prospect train, but under contract, and now certainly part of the of the team going forward. It's a big step to go from the reserve list to the 50-man list to be under contract, and so.
So Niemelainen is 6'6" and 190 pounds, is he not? It's like, and he's what I remember. I watched him. I
Uh-huh.
watched him some of his games from his draft year. The guy can really skate. He's quite agile for a
Hmm.
player that big. And I think the idea is he doesn't put up any points. He's never put up any points.
Right.
He's a defensive defenseman, but someone that large who can skate that well, who has NHL level skating ability and NHL size, I can see why they signed him, even though he's not much of a puck mover. Maybe he can work on that aspect of his game, and he'll be certainly in Bakersfield next year, no doubt
Yes.
about it. And I like the signing. We'll see. Like, I don't think he's a great bet to become an NHLer, but he's an okay, as it goes. He's an okay bet.
Well, when you take a third round draft pick, I mean, you're already rolling the dice on the guy and expending a pretty significant asset. When when you pick a guy in the top 100 of a draft, and so you might as well play it out and see how it goes. He's shown good signs. Housen had very nice things to say about how big step forward he took in 2019-20, and that's what got the organization interested. And of course, the clock was ticking, so they went uh, and got the deal done. Interesting thing with Niemelainen uh, that does not apply to Philip Berglund is that he spent 2 years over here in junior hockey playing
Yeah,
for the Saginaw Spirit. So his uh, reintroduction to the narrow ice should be a lot less painful than you might expect for some of these Euros coming over. Like last year, I think we saw it with Joel Pearson a little bit that the big ice or the little ice really, really put the stress on him. Well, Niemelainen, he's got the advantage of those 2 years in Saginaw. And even though he went back to Finland with 1 year of junior eligibility remaining, at least, he's got that under his belt. And now he's got some years of pro under his belt and he's ready for the next step. And the next step is clearly Bakersfield. I wouldn't anticipate seeing him in Edmonton at all in 2021. But now he's in the system and we'll see what transpires as he gets a chance to play the North American game.
I was more excited about the Berglund signing, although
Me
when I
too.
heard he's not coming for a year, I was a little disappointed because I think he should be coming now, honestly. Like, I think he's, what is he, 23, 22, 23. He's done everything. He's become top four, maybe top pairing defenseman in the Swedish league. He's a right shot guy. He's a big guy. He's putting up points there. He's done everything he can do in the Swedish league. I don't really understand why he's spending another year there. Although maybe with all the uncertainty in the world, maybe he just, I don't know if that factored into his decision or not. But I just think, man, they could have used him in Bakersfield this year, especially on right defense. I mean, right now on right defense, they have Evan Bouchard, who's likely to be on the Oilers. Not David Desharnais, but what is his name?
Vincent.
Vincent Desharnais, who's 6'7" Goliath of a player who doesn't skate that well, and Janice Jacks, who's a U.S. college free agent who may or may not pan out. They've got Theodor Lindstrom, Marcus Niemelainen, and Dmitry Samarukov on the left side. They're quite covered. So Berglund would have been that veteran on the right side, but it looks to me like Bruce, they're going to have to now bring in a veteran on the right side for the Bakersfield defense. But Berglund is by all accounts, he can really move the puck. He's a very strong puck mover in the Swedish league, a decent skater, and he's got good size. So I'm
Six
excited about that signing.
6'3", 209. Like he sounds like a clone of Adam Larson by those specs. I mean, as for style of play, I don't suppose he's quite as greasy a player as Larson, but it sounds like he's got a lot of game. And there's a outstanding contributor to Low Tide's comments section named Swedish Poster. Nobody knows who he is, but he clearly has a lot of inside knowledge of the Swedish league, and he uses this pseudonym, so there's no way of telling. But he's been talking about Philip uh, Berglund since before the Oilers drafted him, as being a good a good target. So and he talks about, his skating is sort of good enough. Like he's not a speedster. He's not this not like Lindstrom that they signed earlier in the week. That skating's his number one, but it just sounds like he's got a full all round game. This year he added a little bit on the power play. He's he was number two on the team in ice time,
Yeah.
and he's played his whole career like he's a native of Skellefteå, and he signed with Skellefteå when he was like 12 or whatever the rules are over there. It's the old system we used to have back in the original 6 days, where you signed a green sheet or whatever the heck they called it with the team, and you were their property forever. And so he's played with Skellefteå the entire time. But just before the interview with Housen, he just signed a 2-year deal with Linköping, and some of us saw that as writing on the wall that he's just not coming over. Linköping had his coach, Bert Robertson, former Edmonton Oiler, who was his coach in Skellefteå, and he wound up moving to Linköping, and now Berglund wants to go play there too. And he signed a 2-year deal, and the compromise that was reached, I guess, was he signed a 2-year deal with the Oilers. They're going to lend him back to Linköping for the first of those years, and then he's going to come over. And by the time he gets here, he's going to be 24 years old. So we'll see. He should be close to, to being ready. And then it's just a matter of needing some time to adjust to that narrow ice. And like I say, he has zero experience. He's never played internationally for Sweden, at least not over here. So even then, he's going to be a half year or 1 year project. But he's a guy, with a chance, no question about it.
Well, the Oilers could easily lose a defenseman in the expansion draft, so
Yep.
they may need a guy like that, a more veteran guy to step right in, especially because
hmm
he plays the right side. So, yeah, good signing.
Yeah, he
Uh,
played with Philip Broberg this past year too, so he has a little bit of experience with that player that they could well both wind up in Bakersfield in October of 2021. So,
yeah, so essentially outside the NHL right now, Bruce, they have Lindstrom, Niemelainen, Samorukov, Bouchard, Broberg, and Berglund. So that's six
wow,
players who are,
decent
some of
prospects.
them are really good. Bouchard and Broberg, obviously, and Samorukov could come on and be a player. So Berglund. So the Oilers, it's kind of comforting. We'll see how many of those guys turn out. But man, that's a because they've got 7 defensemen in Edmonton who can
Yeah.
play hockey,
Well,
including Lagesson, right? So the Oilers are really stacked right now, Bruce. And for the first time, they don't have that true number one guy as we always say, but they've got a lot of good defensemen.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I mean, you gave a nice list of six guys outside the NHL, and that didn't include all of Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones, and William Lagesson,
Yeah,
who got promoted to the NHL this year and spent time in the league. Now, Lagesson, of those three, he's the one that's maybe got the furthest to go. I think Jones and Bear are simply put on the team.
they're
So
there.
we
Yeah,
don't need to think about them any longer as being minor leaguers, but we sure can think of them as being young defensemen. They're 22 years old. So there's a real nice uh, collection of solid, promising defenders under 25 years old in the
almost
organization,
brings
like a large number of them.
yeah, it almost brings a tear to my eye, Bruce, having such quality on defense. Like when you mentioned Bear and Jones, I mean, what two fantastic young hockey players, and they're both just starting out in the NHL, and the Oilers should be able to keep them on the team for some time, unless
hmm
there's a horrible salary cap issues that come up, which might. All right,
And in
go
there,
ahead.
just one quick mention of James Hamlin, the other guy that was signed since our last podcast. And he's an Edmonton native of the Southside Athletic Club. In fact, he played on that super team with Tyler Benson and Stuart Skinner in 2012-13 when Benson set all those crazy records. Anyway, he is a uh, free agent out of junior, 21 years old. He just finished his overage season. He played 5 full years in Medicine Hat, over 300 games, which is a rare milestone for juniors. And he was, get this, captain of the Medicine Hat Tigers for 3 seasons. which is to me unheard of in junior. Once in a while you have a guy coming back and being a captain for a second year, a third year. So that, I mean, on its face, it doesn't tell you anything, and at the same time, it tells you they probably got a nice character guy there. They would not have, he would not have had that role on that team for that long if he didn't have some sort of good underlying qualities about him. And I mean, he's 5'10" and 181 pounds or something. So I mean, he's going to he's going to need to dig deep to make it. But he is an interesting candidate. Not to me, that's a good signing. I don't mind rolling the dice on one or two of these overage juniors that are starting to show something. I mean, he was third in the WHL in scoring. So I mean, we're not talking about a guy, is just a role player. He was a big time scorer for Medicine Hat. So I like the signing. And
yeah, I mean, it's along the lines of the Cameron Hebig signing. And man, Hebig sure looked good at development camp, but he never was able to break through at the AHL level in 2 years there. So, all right, Bruce, let's talk about the Playfair interview and the Oilers penalty kill. So let's just start with the Playfair's. It was very interesting. So their overall philosophy on the penalty kill isn't to treat it as a penalty kill. It's to treat it just like go out there and play 5-on-5 hockey, using many of the same tactics. So there's one fewer player out there. Yep. So in terms of like they're not obviously aggressively forechecking, but in terms of the forecheck and the neutral zone play and the D zone play, there's just a lot of focus on getting one-on-one battles going and engaging aggressively in those one-on-one battles, as if it's just even strength play out there and you're going for it. So when the plays coming through the neutral zone, a lot of the teams use a specific PK formation, which Playfair called the 1-3. And at the 1-3, you have one player at center ice and three players lined up on the blue line. Player at center ice is supposed to funnel the play to one side or the other, and then the player at the blue line strikes the puck carrier at the blue line, makes a hard stand at the blue line, and tries to keep it from coming into their zone. So this is a very, it's like it's a neutral zone trap trying to prevent a zone entry.
Yep.
The Oilers' philosophy is different. The winger will go on the forecheck, will go hard after the player carrying the puck. But the defensemen are not so much focused on that hard stand at the blue line. What they want to do, Bruce, is they do not want any penetration into the middle of the ice or cross-seam passes. So what they're looking for, the wingers go on hard after that player carrying the puck in, but everyone else on the ice is picking up players in the middle of the ice, covering them, so they can't cut into the middle of the ice, so they can't get a cross-seam pass across the middle of the ice, and so they can't get a shot from the middle of the ice. Because they want to avoid three things above all else on this penalty kill. They want to avoid shots, penetration in the middle of the ice, shots in the middle of the ice. They want to avoid cross-seam passes, and they want to avoid rebound shots. The rebound shots is, I'm sure every team's the same. It's collapse to the net, right, when there's a shot and pick up somebody. So every team in the NHL is doing that. But it sounds like the Oilers are doing something a wee bit different than many of the other teams, at least, in terms of the zone entry. And this probably explains more than anything else why there's more shots this year, outside shots, but fewer high-grade scoring chance shots, because they are covering off the middle of the ice. That's their entire focus. So what did you make of that, Bruce?
It made a lot of sense to me, and I could visualize some of the things that he was talking about. I mean, I know they had the low-high guys in the middle, and often they would pressure the guy on one side of the umbrella. He would pass to the top of the center point, but there'd be a guy on him, and if that guy could make another quick pass, he would find a guy open on the far boards on what was originally the weak side boards, but the guy'd be a long way from the net, and he'd be off on an angle. And he'd still have, there'd still be one defender in front, usually pushing around with the net front guy. But it wasn't like, even if they gave up two good passes in a row, they weren't giving up clean shots. And they weren't, definitely not. We've talked about the cross-seam passes more than a few times. that
Yeah.
used to absolutely kill the Oilers. And this year, there just seemed to be a refreshing lack of them. And
Yeah. Yeah.
what Playfair says that has been identified as a priority. And of course, he also identified that they brought in some additional troops in the persons, especially of Riley Shea and Josh Archibald in the forward unit. Defensemen mostly the same, but Ethan Bear added, and of course Mike Smith is one of the two netminders this year. But part of that was player acquisition and those players coming through and delivering the goods on the penalty kill. But a lot of it clearly was system. I found this a fascinating read to see, dig a little deeper into what it is they're trying to accomplish out there. And now we've got 71 games of results to say, not only are they trying to accomplish it, they've accomplished it to this point. They've got, outstanding results.
So once the puck gets into the Oilers zone, they're again, excuse me. As long as the puck's kind of like once the other team has full possession,
Mm-hmm.
which will happen to any team, right? Then the Oilers are doing what everyone's doing. They're blocking passing lanes with their stick. They're trying to, but when there's doubt, when like the puck's in play, when it's a bit of a scramble, and that's often the case on a penalty kill, they're again playing it like it's 5-on-5. Playfair said, and so what they'll essentially do is if the puck's on one side of the ice, they'll send three guys over there,
Right.
one guy to engage in a fierce puck battle, two other guys on the other two offensive players covering those guys, and they'll have one guy hanging back in case all hell breaks loose, and they
Right.
beat the Oilers three players at the point of attack, point of defense, and it gets by them. There's one guy back to help the goalie, but they want those three players to fully engage and to fully battle. And I can remember this, Bruce, thinking like being on the edge of my seat at times
Mm-hmm.
watching the Oilers PK, thinking, man, this is
That
risky.
one guy's really open, isn't he?
Yeah, this is
But
risky.
he's a
Like
long way from the net.
if they beat this guy, don't they see that? Like I was thinking, but usually, often aggression pays off in hockey,
Oh.
and the whole strategy was essentially they know that they're up against these absolutely fantastic attackers, so they don't want the attackers wheeling around at the top of the umbrella of the which is just below the offensive blue line, half wall to the point man to the half wall. They don't want that wheeling around of the puck there, like we saw so often the Oilers were able to do on their own power play. What they wanted to do was the puck goes to the half wall, and they wanted to force everything down low, down to the boards, down to the corners behind the net, because they felt that this kind of aggressive man-to-man coverage then at that point had a much better chance of cutting off a big section of the ice on the other half of the ice, and you can then engage in that one-on-one battles. He called it striking. That's when you can strike and
Mm-hmm.
win the puck and shoot it down the ice. So that's the idea, generally speaking, is to force that play down low to the corners, strike there, and ice it. What'd you make of that?
That it all sort of fit with what I remembered seeing. The other aspect that I noticed that you asked him was something we talked about sort of the net power play goals and the
Yeah.
business of pushing the offense. And he sort of said that sort of phase two to uh, to more aggressively pursue the options of what they can do when Oilers have the puck. But this year they identified that the defending is clearly the main role of the penalty kill anyway. So, uh, and the results certainly show that they had very little attack on the shorthand. And part of it was just choice of player personnel that they used. I mean, um, Nuge got some time with Kara, who's not a strong attacking player, and uh, Draisaitl got a lot of specific own zone assignments, winning faceoffs and so on. McDavid didn't play on the penalty kill at all, essentially. So they pull their horns into a little bit to some degree, but they by focusing on the defensive play with their better defensive players, you can't argue with the results to this stage.
So one of the things I asked him about was Chris Russell's shot blocking numbers,
Mm-hmm.
because they took a precipitous, like, they what, 40% drop from year to year. So when the
On the
Oilers
penalty
play
kill, yeah.
on the penalty kill, when the Oilers penalty kill was so bad last year, he blocked a lot more shots than this year. Although every other defenseman's shot blocking went up. So I was trying to make sense of that, if there was any sense to make of it. And Playfair, he said he didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
He said he hadn't noticed that. He said they're all blocking shots, and he said Chris Russell's our premier shot blocker. He spoke exceedingly highly of Chris Russell's defensive
I
game.
saw that.
Something that both you and I have done a lot, because we recognize the value of the player's defensive ability. And he said what he said about shot blocking was he referred to the PK as the 2-minute game.
Right.
And you have to win the 2-minute game, and shot
Mhm.
blocking is absolutely crucial to that, according to the coach. And so what happens is you have the pucks on the half wall or down in the corner, and these fierce battles going on, and the Oilers are like 3-man. They have 3 men down there, and the one guy on the other side, that are usually a defender, who's still in front of the net. And if the puck then swings over fast, and then
Mhm.
the guy is open, like let's say it swings from the right half wall to the point, and then to the left half wall, and that guy, he's open for a shot, and it's like Alex Ovechkin or Patrick Laine. That's when they want the shot block. There's this moment
Right.
when they are absolutely looking for the shot block, for the player to sacrifice and do that. Playfair said he's got a whole group of defensemen who are willing to do that, and he was extremely happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still a mystery why Chris Russell's shot blocking totals.
Yeah, that is a mystery, and it may just be a small sample thing. I mean, we're only talking about relatively few minutes over
We
the
are,
course of
yeah,
70 games. You know, what are we talking about? Under 3 hours of hockey, and if you're counting block shots, you know, in a handful per hour, it doesn't take very many uh, uh, cases um, to change that average significantly. And maybe that's all we saw was just a little bit of an outlier that because as we did notice all along, the other D men all seem to block as many or more as they have in the past.
yeah.
So may just have been maybe instead of blocking shots, he forced a couple more to miss the net and stuff. And then
Yeah,
uh, they're so.
it
His
could well
overall
mean,
totals did go down. I thought he left his feet less this year, but
yeah,
that's
could well mean nothing. I mean,
mhm,
essentially, there are so few stats that are useful in
we're grasping at
rating
straws.
rating individual play on the PK, that I was probably just looking for something, and maybe there's nothing there. Probably there's nothing there. Bruce, the one other thing that stood out was he talked about how Dustin Schwartz, the goalie coach, prepared Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen. Now,
Yeah.
Dustin Schwartz has been here for a long time, so presumably it would be the same way of preparing them. So what he does is he prepares a videotape of the opposing team's power play that they're about to play. He sits down with the goalies and goes over, here's the 3-4 things that here's their tendencies, here's the shots they're trying to get. And then the whole team, the whole PK unit sits down with the goalie, and all the coaches, Tippett, Gulitson, Playfair, they all sit
Oh,
down
really?
and
Okay.
they all go through it then. So this really is a total team effort, and so they all know, the goalies know, and the players know what's going to come. And what struck me, I don't know what's happened in other years, we can't say, but there seems to be a huge focus in getting the goal. Like, the goalies really understand this PK, and they understand. And I'm just guessing here. I didn't like so. If they know that there's going to be intense one-on-one battles, the chances of an NHL defender getting beat one-on-one on a PK are very low. So the goalies are probably thinking, like, yeah, there could be a shot that's going to derive out of this one-on-one battle on this side over here, let's say on the right half wall. But the thing, I've got to be ready to, and I've got to be ready for that shot. But really, I know their tendency is to go over here in that situation. So they're ready, like mentally ready to make that move, to set, to push, to block. If that terrible breakdown does happen and the pass comes over. And that probably, that kind of syncing of the goalie with the PK unit, I'm sure that's happened every year with the Oilers, but they're certainly on it this year. Okay.
Yeah. The role that Dustin Schwartz plays is bigger than one might have imagined. But I mean, your penalty killing. I mean, how many times have we heard the most important penalty killer is the goalie?
Yeah.
And obviously, there's a lot of truth in it. He's the most important defensive player on the team, period. But having that goalie prepared for other teams' tendencies, and again, this is something that wouldn't exactly be uh, it's something new at the NHL level. I mean, preparation is key for all the teams, but it sounds like, from what he described of how they were going about getting the Oilers ready, it sounded like a pretty polished and professional plan that they had going.
Already, I'd like to thank the Oilers for making Jim Playfair available, and for thanks to Coach Jim Playfair for being so generous with his time and open. And now, I don't think the headline of my post, Bruce, is "Secrets Revealed by Coach," but what I say is, I think
Secret to you and me.
I think fans are going to get a lot out of this. Like, honestly, I think most fans are going to read this and think, yeah, that's what they're doing. That's really interesting. I never heard that before. I never heard it put that way before. I mean, I hadn't heard these things before. Maybe they've been talked about a lot. Maybe I just missed it. But I don't think there's no secrets revealed here to other NHL teams. They know inside out, backwards, upside down what the Edmonton Oilers are trying to do on the penalty kill and on the power play. They know the tendencies of other teams inside out. And I think that's, Playfair was able to speak so freely about it because they all know what everybody else is doing. There's no secrets about this. It's all happening out on the ice by very experienced hockey people are analyzing it and watching the videotape and breaking down the numbers and doing all kinds of things to understand it. So secrets revealed for me, but not for certainly not for NHL insiders and coaches.
Well, I was in the same room as Jim Playfair once because I saw him play his first NHL game. He was a first round draft pick of the Edmonton Oilers in 1982, wasn't it? Yes, 20th overall. And a year later, in the fall of '83, he got called up for one game, and it was the famous Mickey Mouse game where the Oilers stomped the New Jersey Devils 13-4. And all the Oilers had, Jari Kurri had 5 goals, Wayne Gretzky had 3, Willie Lindstrom had 3. They had 3 hat tricks in that game. And then one of the other goal scorers was Jim Playfair in his first NHL game, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, plus 3. How's that for a nice, promising start to a career that never really took off until he took off the equipment and put on a suit and tie, and then he's become a fairly successful coach after all that. But that was a very memorable game. I still remember it.
I'm just looking at Jim Playfair's hockey DB picture from the '80s, Bruce, and that mullet, man. He looks like he could be the bass player for Aha. He's got the look. Yeah. Anyway, that was a real pleasure, and hopefully, maybe in the future, I can talk to more Oilers coaches because I love talking to the coaches. I mean, and I'd love to interview Holland as well. No, the players, I don't know. Like I don't know. Like they have to be so careful, I think, in what they say. I don't often find it very illuminating what the players have to say. All due respect to the players, I just think if I was interviewed every day about my job, I would say sweet F.A. as well, and reveal nothing. So that's generally what I find with player interviews, but maybe I'm just...
Well, I'm interested in what's the plan. What is it that they're trying to do? And that's where the coaches or the GM come into play. And the players are more, we're trying to implement and execute the plan. And a lot of the stuff that they do above and beyond is stuff that you can't even really necessarily talk about. I mean, you just do it, right? I mean, it's just an execution, and it's the creative, imaginative, offensive play. Well, you can't really write a book about it. It's just in that moment, seeing the play and making it. I mean, I never heard Wayne Gretzky make very interesting. He remembered all of his points, but I never remember the descriptions of them as being particularly illuminating. But so to me, I would rather hear, what do the coaches have to say? What is it they're trying to do? What is, what's the objective, and did they achieve it, and what do they still have to work on? Those kind of follow-ups. But I enjoyed reading this post very much.
I think Ken Dryden was a fairly good uh, describer after the fact. Like I'm just saying, like I'm just trying to think of
Yeah, no.
exceptions, exceptions, exceptions to the rule, Bruce.
Oh
Exceptions to the
yeah.
general rule. So there are some players who are able to articulate,
Mm-hmm.
and Dryden did a fantastic job.
Wow.
I remember the one passage in his book, The Game, where he talks about when he finally kind of understood goaltending, like just not moving very much of the net, but using every little piece of his body in economical fashion to stop the puck.
Right.
That was a very apt description. So there are some players who maybe when they're done their careers, they're more able to articulate exactly what it was like to be a player. I mean, Ray Ferraro is really good at it,
Mm-hmm.
but they do tend to be the exception, and the coaches are. But the
Right.
coaches are thinking about the tactics and are able to describe that. Riley Shane, Bruce.
Oh yeah, well, we're going to be writing
So
about him and
yeah,
starting our player reviews. We've gone into some detail on Ken Holland and Dave Tippett's first season with the Oilers, and we're going to start our player reviews by looking at the several players whose contracts are expiring and whom decisions will have to be made in the coming weeks for the 2020-21 season. And I'm going to start with Riley Sheahan just because he was the guy we talked about him last week when they signed Gaten Haas, and he was sort of the fourth center to be signed, and sort of he got the first musical chair before Riley Sheahan did, and so Riley Sheahan, do they keep him or do they look elsewhere? Four centers isn't enough. They're going to need a fifth one, and Sheahan's the first guy they're allowed to talk to when the market opens up to go and find a replacement another time. So that's going to influence the discussions that both the team and the players are both looking, I would think, for a little security at this point. But in preliminary investigating him, big surprise here, by far the lion's share of his value is on the penalty kill.
yeah.
And he came in with excellent past history. I wrote about him last summer. It's one of those ones where I actually guessed right once in a while, and posted his name in July as being a guy that might fit what the Oilers needed. And I looked into his penalty killing record for the previous 2 years, and he played with I think three different teams over that time. A little bit with Detroit, then with Pittsburgh and Florida. So he played in a different team, different penalty kills, different teammates, and he posted consistently very good results for preventing goals on the penalty kill. I think he was like 20th out of 100 or something in that range of guys that played significant minutes. And so he was in the top, certainly the top quartile of the league, and he did it again this year. And he was on the Oilers' first unit, lots of responsibility, lots of face-off duty, where he also earned his stripes with just a lot of work in the D zone in particular. So those are the areas that uh, his play was strong. 5-on-5, not necessarily that great, and so they could probably do better, find a better player 5-on-5. But I'm not sure they could necessarily get someone that plugs the holes the way that he did. The thing that impressed me that almost the most about Riley Sheahan last summer, remember they were talking about Derek Brassard coming here.
Mm-hmm.
And Derek Brassard was saying, well, I want to be on the scoring line. I consider myself a top six player and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, that's the last guy they need. They got the top six centers, all the top six centers you could possibly want. They need guys that are going to do the grunt work. And the day they signed Riley Sheahan, his story was completely the opposite. He says, I want the tough minutes. I want the defensive zone assignments. And I'm going to go and find the exact quote and see to what degree he lived up to it. But I just loved his attitude of what it was he was willing to do to stick around in the NHL. And I think we saw plenty of that attitude on the ice. So
Here's what I would say about Riley Sheahan, Bruce, is that
mhm.
I think we learned the hard way last few years. If players have the wrong line mate, they
Mhm.
really struggle. we saw this repeatedly. Anyone who played with Milan Lucic in his final 2 years, and poor Jesse Puljujärvi got so much ice time with Lucic. I just think it's such a setback, even strength, to play with a guy who can't keep up. And I'm going to suggest that J.J. Kara this year had a hard time keeping up, generally speaking, at even strength. Yep. And Sheahan played a lot of time with him, and I don't think that line ever clicked. I think that with Kara, and Archibald, that line was too slow by far to get it done in the modern NHL. They had two big kind of guys who replicated the same skill set, and it was one too many with that skill set. Now, there was a brief period of time before Joakim Nygård got injured in January, where they had Sheahan, Nygård, and Archibald as the checking line. And Riley Sheahan's even strength game suddenly came to life. In 9 games that month, he had 6 points.
Oh, yeah.
That line was flying out there, and for a while there, I was thinking, "Wow, they've done it. They've got they've got 2 lines. It still hadn't worked out McDavid's line mates. They've got 2 lines. They have the Draisaitl line going like crazy, and they've got a third line. This line is great as third lines go. So I would agree that his even strength play was not great, but I think you get him the right line mates, and he can be a very useful even strength player. That's what I saw for a short period of time. You need to see it for a longer period of time, but you give him 2 fast wingers, and I think he can be the kind of. I liked his defensive play in the Oilers zone, even strength as well. Thought he was very responsible, and he's not much of an offensive player, but if you put him with 2 guys who can skate a bit and create their own offense, that could work.
Yeah, well, offense is. I mean, obviously it's nice to have the offense, but what you really want the bottom 6 guys to do is not get killed. And Sheahan on the season, like they did bleed some goals. So 5-on-5 was not his real strength, but like say on the penalty kill, good enough. And 15 points, so not completely terrible for a season that wasn't over yet. For 4th line production anyway, like it wasn't like he was a zero offensive guy like Colin Fraser or something that never scored. So he chipped in a little bit at the offensive end. So
yeah, and he was minus 8. Go ahead.
Jujhar Khaira, we're going to find the same thing about Jujhar Khaira. Almost all of his value was on the penalty kill, where he was terrific.
He was very good.
He was number 1 in the NHL. I found today in researching Sheahan. Khaira was number 1 in the NHL among forwards who played 90+ minutes on the penalty kill for fewest goals against per 60.
He was really good, and I'm not saying, maybe Jujhar Khaira could be your third line center instead of Sheahan.
Maybe he's Riley Sheahan, and they dump Sheahan, but
yeah. So I'm just saying the two together didn't work, and let's face it, Khaira had some struggles, more struggles at even strength than any other player for a forward. Now Sheahan was minus 8 in October, Bruce.
Yeah.
And for the rest of the season, he was minus 5. So most of his trouble, and Archibald
really struggled early. They were hurt. And they were hurt. They were playing with different line mates every game because one of them wasn't hurt, another one was.
Yeah.
And they just got caved in the first month, and then they were pretty good, at least pretty even thereafter.
Alrighty. Well, hopefully, Bruce, in the next week we'll have some good news about the NHL. That's what I got my fingers crossed about. I think it's good. I think we'll hear something the next couple of weeks here. It's my bet. So, but
some good news of any description won't go amiss these days. Holy moly!
Well, you can go golfing.
It's been a tough year. Well, I guess so.
I never golf.
If I knew how to golf.
Yeah, I'm not a golfer either. I've got 5 kids. I mean, when did I have time to golf for the last 30 years? Anyway, all right, Bruce. Thank you for talking tonight. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.